The Christmas Tapes. Chapter 3. The Sister. Dear Lily, Mummy and Daddy said that in your last letter you asked if you could bring your boyfriend home for Christmas this year. I wanted to write and tell you that I think you're being incredibly selfish. You know that this is my first proper Christmas with Vernon, and you know how much I was looking forward to him meeting the family properly. I am used to you attempting to steal my thunder on every possible occasion, and I have been incredibly gracious about it for 7 years now. But this is the absolute final straw. I cannot believe you would be so thoughtless as to invite some flash-in-the-pan summer romance when Vernon and I have been seeing each other for 2 years now. You know what he means to me, and you know how he feels about unwholesome elements. If you dare spoil my Christmas, I will never speak to you again. Your sister, Petunia Ann Evans. Lily fought back tears as she finished reading the letter. She had been so excited when the envelope arrived on the breakfast table that morning, recognising Petunia's handwriting. She'd been silly enough to save it, to keep it for later when she could read it in private. And now here she was, in her favourite spot by the window in Gryffindor common room, hands shaking and close to crying. She folded the letter up and slid it into her pocket. She shook her head fiercely and looked out of the window, breathing deeply and willing the lump in her throat to retreat. That stupid cow isn't worth crying over. Severus's words. Lily couldn't help hearing them whenever Petunia hurt her. Even after everything Sev had done, it was still a comfort. You're worth 10 of her. Better not to think about Sev for too long. Either she'd never be able to stop crying. She blew her nose into her pocket hanky and looked up. Mary had once told her that if she was going to cry, looking up helped. Save your mascara, she had grinned. Lily smiled thinking of that and felt better. Ugh, well, that settled it. James definitely couldn't have come for Christmas. She'd wanted him there too. More and more, Lily felt like a stranger when she visited home. She had hardly any friends in Cokeworth now. They all went to Petunia's school, the local grammar, and did O-levels or A-levels, or else went to typing college. Some of them had jobs, or steady boyfriends on the cusp of proposing. Lily couldn't tell any of them what her plans were, or anything at all about Hogwarts, which they just thought was an ultra-posh private school, like Cheltenham ladies. She knew they all thought she was a bit of a snob now, and she suspected it might have something to do with Petunia. Of course, there was no question of Lily going to the Potters for Christmas, as much as she'd quite like to. Evan's family Christmases were hugely important to her parents, particularly her father, who was always so happy to see Lily come home after the school term. She'd just have to explain it to James. Fortunately, she knew he'd understand. It had been quite a revelation, perhaps the most startling of all, to discover just how understanding and thoughtful James could be. The way he'd looked after Remus had proved that much to her. It was probably about time to go and meet James now, actually. His practice was due to finish in a minute or two. She wiped quickly under her eyes just to make sure, and glanced at her ghostly reflection in the window glass to check her face. Lily blushed at her own girlishness. She'd never given a toss how she looked before. She set off out of the portrait hole and towards the grounds. He would be in a good mood right after practice, even if it had gone badly. More amenable to bad news. Lily rehearsed in her head exactly what she planned to say. Best not to mention Petunia's letter. Better to frame it as her own idea. She didn't want James to know how her sister felt about magic, or wizards, or any of it. It was bad enough that he was a pureblood and she had to explain every other muggle thing to him. That was unfair. She scolded herself. At least James cared enough to ask. At least he was genuinely interested. She remembered Snape's look of distaste when she did anything to remind him of her muggle-born status. And he'd been a half-blood. "Excuse me!" Connor Fitzpatrick, a younger Gryffindor boy, came hurrying past her, bumping into her shoulder, hard. "Oi!" Lily shouted, as he kept marching off back towards the common room. She'd make a note of that. Why did boys have to be so rude? She readjusted her dress quickly. It was a neat navy blue pinafore over a cream polo neck jumper. A bit shorter than she liked, but she had nice thick tights on, and Mary kept telling her that her legs were her best feature. Potter agreed, and she'd thumped him for it, though secretly she thought about it all the time. She descended the steps slowly, taking in the scent of pine, orange and clove. Christmas at Hogwarts was wonderful, and to think this would be her last. She remembered the very first day, crossing the lake in the little rowboat with Severus, sitting in the great hall and just staring at everything. Magic had never ceased to amaze her. If she had her way, she would never leave. Lily had had a few chats with McGonagall earlier that year about what it took to become a teacher at Hogwarts. McGonagall had been kind, but suggested that she try a job outside of school first, to get some life experience. Fair enough, Lily supposed. She knew very little of the wizarding world, really. Besides, the only thing Lily thought she was good enough to teach was potions, and Slughorn didn't seem set to retire any time soon. Perhaps a job in an apothecary. Her kindly potions professor had mentioned that he had a number of contacts in that area, if she was interested. She made a note to talk to James about it sometime. She valued his opinion on that sort of thing, and after all, his grandfather had been a famous potioneer. "Oh, hiya, Lily!" Mary was coming out of one of the girls' bathrooms by the grand entrance. She looked like a model straight out of the Jackie magazine. Mary loved non-uniform days. "Hi," Lily smiled. "Must have just missed you leaving the tower. Meeting Marlene?" "Yeah, I thought I might as well. Meeting Potter?" "Yeah." They walked along together, arm in arm, huddling close together as they came out into the cold winter air. Mary smelled very grown up, some perfume a boy had bought her last Valentine's Day. Lily wished she had that much confidence. "How is Potter? Gone all the way yet? Full Monty?" "Oh my God, Mary!" "What?" She giggled. "I'm just curious. Never had James myself. Not even a snog." "Well, I'm glad." Lily rolled her eyes. 2 out of 4 isn't bad. Never fancied Peter, poor chap. I'm still not sure whether I believe you about Remus." "Ask him." She shrugged confidently. "What are you two doing after this? Cozying up in your usual spot on the nice couch?" "I need to tell him he can't come home with me for Christmas." Lily bit her lip, frowning. They had reached the pitch now, and the players were just landing, by the looks of things. They waved at Peter, sitting in the stands. "Junie won't have it. Her boyfriend's spending the day, so I suppose it's not really fair." "Ugh, bugger Petunia," Mary tutted. "That thick-necked boyfriend of hers might be big, but he doesn't take up that much room. You should come over to our flat on Christmas Day. 15 of us round the table, and that's a quiet dinner." "Yeah, but I don't want to upset her." Lily was distracted now, watching James descend. God, he was bloody fantastic on a broom. She felt a hot blush start up under her polo neck, creeping up towards her cheeks. Last night they'd gone a bit further than usual, and he'd slipped his hand up under the elastic of her bra. She'd gasped, and he'd gasped, and he'd murmured against her lips, and she'd practically dissolved into a puddle. "Anyway," Mary was saying, "you're completely bonkers over that boy. All's fair in love and war, innit?" Lily murmured, not really listening.